The prime goal of government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. And in order to do that, you've got to fragment the majority so they really can't get together and do very much. And you have to concentrate power in the wealth of the nation.
That be your welcome for the next hour. I'm not hearing myself through the cans, but that's okay. We have an amazing guest today, someone who has far better things to do than to be here, but took the time out of his busy schedule to come down, schlep down to the East Village to sit down for an interview. The legend himself, John Stossel, decades-long journalist, best-selling author, formerly host of Stossel on Fox Business, current Fox News contributor, doing a lot of work with Reason TV. John, thank you so much for coming here. It's a privilege.
I should say I came here and Malice wasn't here. He just sneaks in at the last second.
Well, that's how Malice does tend to work. It's like Krampus on Christmas. The first thing I want to ask you, and this is kind of be like a backhanded compliment, but I don't know that it really is that backhanded. You've been around for decades spreading the voice of liberty. For a long time, you were pretty much the only one doing it, right? It must have been kind of a lonely gig. Are you aware of how beloved you are in the broader liberty movement on a personal level?
Well, some people love me. I know that. But the liberty movement is sadly small.
Sure. But I just mean people who work with you, like everyone who knows, so, people gossip and talk a lot. We work in offices.
I assume they say bad things.
So you don't have an awareness. Everyone adores you.
Really?
You don't know this?
No, I don't think it's true because I'm not that socially warm and fuzzy.
But that's what makes it, that's why you set me up perfectly. So everyone, because you're so earnest, because you don't ever put yourself on a pedestal, you're not warm and fuzzy, but you're encouraging with young people. You're open to talking to them at events. It's not like you're going to be their best friend, but you certainly aren't talking down to them. And I'll give you a story. I was at Kennedy's house last week. Kennedy, host of Fox Business. She was Monday to Thursday. You used to be on Friday. And she's like, oh my God, I love John. And this was her John Stossel story. And tell me if you remember this. And it was corroborated by two other people. Her daughter was reading your book. And she took a picture of her daughter reading her book. You're on the set of her former show, The Independents. And she said, hey, let me show you this picture of my kid. And do you remember what you said? I don't care about other people's kids. I'm really not that interested.
Yeah, women are always wanting to show you pictures of their babies. And I don't think this is just me. Like, it's guys that are not that interested in seeing little kids.
But the thing is, Kennedy wasn't offended. When she was telling the story, even years later, she was like, oh my God, I love him so much. Because there's such a sincerity to you, which is interesting to me because I imagine, having seen it all, ABC, network, and cable, there's a lack of sincerity in newsrooms in general. Isn't that the case?
Yes. I don't think I consciously reacted to that. That just seemed like the way to deal with people. I've always been a little autistic and blunt and plowing through life as best I can.
Yeah, but it's such a competitive field. And the daggers must have been out for you many times, especially if you're on network and you're going against the basic protocol of what you're supposed to be saying. Was that ever a problem for you?
Well, yeah, it certainly became a problem at ABC, but because I'm a stutterer and didn't intend to go into broadcasting, and I picked consumer reporting because it allowed me not to compete with my peers, and I didn't want to be at the press conference trying to shout questions and block horribly. And so they left me alone. Oh, he's not doing the important stuff. He's just doing consumer reporting. And at the time, people considered the important stuff to be politics, disasters, the weather, crime. And that was about it, which left sociology, medicine, business, markets, so much of the good stuff to me. And that helped me succeed.
So one of the things that, in totalitarian countries, the trick is always to try not to get noticed. Because once you're on someone's powerful radar screen, that's when things get difficult for you. There's no upside. There's often a huge downside. Was that kind of something you consciously realized? Like, I don't want these people to be realizing what I'm doing over here while they have their own little pet projects?
No, I'm a narcissist. I wanted to be noticed. Also, in television, if you're not noticed, you don't matter.
But I don't mean not noticed. I mean the fact maybe you would hope that they weren't registering exactly what it is that you were doing, because you were undermining, in a certain sense, a lot of the message that they were trying to put forward, with the message of having the government do everything, the message of for hardcore leftism.
Well, at first, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just trying to survive, and I'd never taken a journalism course, and I'd got my worst grades in English, so I didn't know how to do this. I just learned through fear. I think that made me succeed in TV because I didn't have all the bad habits taught to me, and I wasn't thinking about the other people. I was just trying to make my stories as interesting and short as I could. Later on, when I woke up and realized that all the Emmy Awards I was winning for bashing business were kind of stupid because they're given to me by the idiot media who love regulation. And we consumer reporters were saying, crooked business we have to have a law. Once I saw that the laws did more harm than good, and I saw that competition protects us much better than government ever will, and became a libertarian, then my colleagues saw me as a threat. And at ABC, Peter Jennings, when he would see me in the hall, would just turn his head away. He'd go like this.
Oh, my goodness.
I was embarrassing ABC News because I had this point of view. He viewed it as conservative point of view. And everybody else in the building had no opinion, including him in his eyes. And I was the only guy with an opinion.
So it also must be hard for them to reconcile, because especially at that point, conservative must have been to some extent synonymous with religious. And the fact that you're not coming at this from some kind of Bible perspective, they didn't really know what box to put you in because you're obviously a New Yorker.
But they put me in the box anyway.
I
mean, somebody came up to me on the street. You John Stossel? Yeah. I hope you die soon. And I'm trying to figure out the nature of the anger.
Yeah.
And
you should have looked at his kids' photos.
I would get it if he thought I was a conservative, because in this town, that's like being a child molester.
Yeah. Or like a Nazi or something like that. Yeah.
But I think drugs should be legal. I think sex work should be legal. I think we should be less involved in Afghanistan and militarily in other countries. I think homosexuality is just fine. And as a libertarian, I thought they would be sympathetic, but they were just as hostile. Something about a consumer reporter saying business is okay and government doesn't need to step in was a big threat to their way of thinking.
So I emailed with you not that long ago because you had a clip that went pretty wide about what you called the red pill movement, right? And you interviewed Candace Owens, who many people regard as the Ayn Rand of our time. And one of the concepts...
Work should be legal.
Okay, one of the concepts that is out there in this whole red pill concept is the idea of the cathedral, the idea of the cathedral, which was coined by this guy Mencius Moldbug, and Andrew Breitbart also independently came up with the idea, is that what we are presented as basically truth in the media is not actually what is truth, but is a conscious misrepresentation of the facts in order to basically use the soft hand to manipulate people as opposed to having to use the iron fist of the state. Do you think that it's a conscious attempt to mislead?
No.
So how do you think it ends up happening that way? Like, for example, a buddy of mine just points out that all the, vis-a-vis Trump, all the corrections are corrections where they were too hard on Trump. There's never corrections on the fact that, oh, we were too kind to him. There's a huge asymmetry.
Because they hate Trump, and when they look for stories that they'll find interesting and that their readers will find interesting, they find oh yes, this will get them, let's go with this one. And they sincerely believe it. They're not in a conspiracy to do it. It's what they think is true.
But it's not a conspiracy so much as a spontaneous order, and here's how theoretically it works. If you go to college, again, I never took an English course either. I never took a broadcasting course, as we can obviously see. You go to university. All your journalism classes are going to be taught by hard left people who will tell you with a straight face that the goal of journalism is to look out for the little guy, which is the basis of leftism. Then you're going to go into these newsrooms where all of your colleagues, by and large, are going to be graduates of the same universities who've been taught the same message independently. So independently, once you have a certain prism, you're going to have the same conclusions.
There's a lot of that, yes. I mean, isn't it good to look out for the little guy? I think I'm looking out for the little guy, and I think markets are the best way to protect the little guy.
Sure, but the point is, if you're not looking out for the little guy, is at the mercy of the big guy. Is the other point of view. So if you are going to just basically,
Sometimes.
if you're going to the big guy in states, if you're going to say we're going to ban corporations or we're going to ban wealthy people and have a 100% inheritance tax, that is going to disproportionately hurt the little guy because they're the first ones to suffer. Venezuela or socialized medicine or textbook examples.
Yeah, any of the government schemes hurt the little guy more because those of us who are doing well will make it. We have other resources. So the little guy is vulnerable. I would say it was the college professor saying, we know the answer, government programs are the answer.
Right.
And the free market, it's useful, brings us some stuff, but it's cruel and unfair, and we need to control it.
Right. It's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. It's not a good thing. It's just a
And they just
pathway.
believe that that's right and that's what's good for America, and it's not a conspiracy.
Well, again, I don't know that it's a conspiracy. Like, for example, if you took 10 libertarians, right, and you asked them 10 questions, basic questions, not esoterica, they're going to have the same 10 answers. So that doesn't make it a conspiracy. That just means that there's a unanimity of vision.
Okay.
So in practice, it would end up and if you took those 10 people and put them in office, they're going to vote the same way. And it's not a conspiracy in that they're organized, but there's a spontaneous order based on the worldview that they've been inoculated into.
True. Though with 10 libertarians, we're so good at splitting hairs that we probably wouldn't get unanimity.
Well, I mean, on basic things like cutting taxes, deregulation, drug legalization, nonviolent crimes, there would be 100% unanimity, don't you think?
I'm not for cutting taxes if we don't cut spending.
Really?
Spending is just as bad. Spending is just another form of tax. The Trump tax cuts with no spending cuts. So Trump tried. I give him credit for that. But Congress increased spending. That's just as bad as high taxes.
You have a very unique style of interviewing. It's kind of the Socratic approach. Is this something that you consciously developed, or was this something that organically came about after years?
At Princeton, I was bored stiff. All these intellectuals were lapping up the lectures, and I just thought, I don't learn this way. And I fished around for what I found was the way I like to hear things. And I tried that.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question in my best John Stossel style. You ready? You call yourself a libertarian. You say the free market can provide better than the government on most things.
Yes.
Books?
Books. Let me think. The free market. Yeah.
Clothing?
Yes.
Food?
Yes.
Well, if the free market's better than providing things than the government, why do we need government at all?
Because I'm not an anarchist. I think there are some things that government will do better.
Such as what?
Pollution control.
Okay.
We could sue each other over pollution, but our court system is so gummed up and gamed up that I can't imagine working. And I've accepted that the Constitution says provide for the common defense, that having the police and defense run by government is the way to go. Though I will accept that you may be right in your argument that government never does anything very well, and private militaries, we already have more private security guards than cops.
Sure.
They might do it better, but I'm not ready to push for that.
Well, the argument for that, which I think is not a hard one to make, is you're safer at a bar, which is full of drunken young males, or a hotel where everyone is a stranger and not native to the area, than you are in public thoroughfares where the government is in charge of security, like subway systems and alleys and parks.
True.
So when you have an area that's under private security, here's another one. Bars are much better at weeding out people who are underage drinkers than governments are. If that's your goal, and they were very smart, they outsourced this to the bar.
But bars would say we only kick out underage drinkers because of a stupid government law, and we would be in trouble if we didn't.
Oh, sure, but my point is, if you have to choose between providing security, the bar is better at weeding out kids from getting alcohol than the government is.
To keep the Socratic role.
I love this.
So you want the rich people who own all the property to just be in charge of all the police forces, and they'll just protect themselves and let themselves do all kinds of evil things while hurting poor people.
Let's see. What would the John Stossel answer to that be?
Some would. A few, most wouldn't.
Right.
Because they want to be well regarded.
And they also don't want to be living in crime-filled neighborhoods.
Well, they just kick everybody out that they thought it all suspicious.
Sure.
And they would live in these sanitized neighborhoods and poor people would be excluded. I think that would be a bad thing. It's a reason in a big country where people deserve a certain level of decency that we shouldn't allow that.
So one of the things, can we talk about your one of the things, I had Stefan Kinsella on my first episode. He's a guy behind IP. And one of the things I encourage people to talk about is they've had traumatic experiences. A lot of times it helps other people because when you have a trauma, as I've had trauma in my life, not only are you dealing with the experience, you don't know what to do, right? There's no pamphlet, so it's doubly tough. Can we talk about your health issue that you had a few years ago?
Sure, talk about anything.
So you had a big health scare a couple of years ago.
I had, through unnecessary medical testing, because my wife is a hypochondriac, I had a lung scan. They found a little thing, and they plucked it out. It's a little piece of lung cancer. Then I guess we got to take out the whole lobe. So I lost one of my 5 lung lobes.
But I mean,
I'm back.
You're hand waving it, but to hear that word, cancer, was it not a terrifying thing?
It was scary, but I mean, I'm old. Something's going to get me. I drive to Cape Cod 5 hours. That's much more likely to kill me than a tiny speck found on one of these scans. They can take things out. After that, I played beach volleyball, got dehydrated, passed out, broke my jaw in 3 places, and lost 4 teeth. I'm more upset about that.
No, but I mean, in all seriousness, if a doctor sits you down, that moment when you hear this, that's not something that you're like, well, at least I'm not driving to Cape Cod.
I blocked it out. I'm sure it was really scary, but I'm good at denial.
Is that the truth?
Yeah, about medical stuff.
Really?
Yes.
Has that always been the case?
I think so. I don't see the gain in worrying about it.
Yeah, but worrying is not a choice.
I distract myself.
Okay.
It's a choice.
So what did you do?
Choose not to worry. Try not to think about it. Have a drink.
Okay.
Play until the surgery, and then just hope for the best.
I mean, yeah, because we were all very worried about you. I mean, a lot of people.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
it's funny. I wrote as a consumer reporter, I had to write a column, one of my weekly columns from the hospital, and about how bad the consumer service is under our system where customers don't pay the bills themselves directly. And that went viral because people like Fox put a pair of lungs with big red spots on it as the lead picture, and it made it sound like I was dying, but I wasn't.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to hear. Okay. So, yeah, so they made it, no wonder we were all worried. They made it sound much worse than it actually was.
And I was looking for an attention-getting lead to the column, so I began by saying, I write this from the hospital. Seems I have lung cancer. And lung cancer conjures up worse things than it turned out to be.
Well, in my understanding, historically, lung cancer only really became a thing after, was it World War I, where people were smoking in huge numbers, that it's almost impossible. You hit the reverse lottery to get it without having been a smoker.
Of cigarettes.
Yeah.
And when I talked about weed with the doctors, they all brushed that off, saying, oh, no, that wouldn't have any effect. But I don't think you're right. I think more than 10-15% of the cases are in non-smokers. So
No, but my point is when it came onto the consciousness of the medical community is the numbers just blew up.
from cigarette smoking.
Yeah, from World War I when cigarettes, so many men were smoking, especially being overseas.
Well, it just reminds me of another government stupidity that I just did a renovation. We had to pay $1,000 to have an asbestos inspector. And asbestos was found to cause horrible lung diseases.
Sure.
Only after many years of following the shipyard workers who were working in asbestos, it was like they were working in a snowstorm. The asbestos was everywhere. And now these parasitic trial lawyers are bankrupting all these companies that expose workers to tiny specks of it. And we have all these unnecessary laws. It's not clear that the tiny amounts do anything. That they had trouble finding out, does asbestos cause cancer, or was it the fact that all the shipyard workers also smoked?
Right. Well, also, that's the other thing. There's no sense of proportionality. So let's suppose you're exposed to they never think of cost benefit. So let's suppose the asbestos is cancerous, but like nicotine or tobacco, excuse me, and it's the equivalent of smoking one cigarette a year. Well, that's really going to be completely irrelevant to your health, even if you have 1 billion people. You run the numbers, but on paper, asbestos it doesn't equals cancer, so you have to spend as much as you want. And this is another good example of how regulations really hurt the small guy, because that small company has to put who knows how much money, and they can't just go bankrupt and fix everything, whereas the big company can easily afford it, and it's money going down the drain. And especially if the workers are informed.
Right. And in this case, the trial lawyers have bankrupted the small companies, and they're actually hitting up the big companies. But enormous wealth that could be put to good use is lost.
So what is the thing that you have most changed your mind about? Obviously, you came from the left originally, or basically apolitical. You're a consumer reporter back from the start. And, very famously, as you were doing your homework, you're like, wait a minute, the results I'm looking for aren't there. What other things have you changed your mind about over the decades?
As a consumer reporter, I would cover the bad guys, and I would see how government rules would make it better. I thought, the trial lawyers will help, and I would cooperate with them. And there's an evil partnership between the trial lawyers and consumer reporters because they can do the research for us.
Yeah.
They spent a year using the power of force that we only give to government and lawyers, in this case subpoena power, and they've got every piece of paper that some company produced, and they find some dirt and they hand that to me, and I look like the big consumer investigative hero.
Sure.
But then I watched how most of the customers of the trial lawyers felt ripped off too. The trial lawyers take more than half the money.
Oh, yeah.
Include the defense lawyers.
And the accolades.
And all the accolades.
Yeah.
And it takes years for people to get their money. And innocent people pay. They made $2 billion claiming that breast implants caused autoimmune disease. One woman got so scared by a CBS report on that, she took a razor blade to her own breast. It turned out the implants did not cause any of these diseases. Do they give the money back? No. Companies have given up AIDS vaccines, given up a Lyme disease vaccine. I don't want to go into that area because the trial lawyers might sue me. Let's stick to our shampoo business or our skin cream business. We are really hurt by that.
Yeah, and then it must drive you particularly crazy when you hear people like Bernie Sanders say, well, we have too many types of deodorants in the store, as if this is a problem.
Right. Though at least I get the logic there. It seems like waste. And they're all wasting money on advertising and promotion. It's a little hard to get your brain around that kind of capitalist excess actually saves us money.
Well, right. It might be in a sense counterintuitive, but just the idea that inherently choice is something that is a problem is something that, to me, maybe from my background, has very disturbing undertones.
Well, Bernie's ignorant about a lot of stuff. The video that Stossel TV released today is about that. Did you know he's got a whole media empire? He releases more videos and gets more views than I do. Quietly, under the radar, he's got 1 billion views probably, pushing nonsense.
Well, I troll him pretty regularly on Twitter, and it's really, really him and Elizabeth Warren. It's a lot of fun. You must be. Is it fun for you seeing people, or are you frustrated by seeing people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez getting into the limelight?
It's frustrating. look, we know what works, what creates prosperity, what makes life good for people. And we've seen it in Hong Kong, and we've seen it fail in Venezuela. We ought to be giving it to the world. And these well-educated people don't get it. So, no, it doesn't make me laugh. It makes me cry.
Well, I think that education is the problem. I mean, haven't you found that Ayn Rand talked about this when she was on Donahue in 1979? Her point being the people who haven't gotten college are harder to fool and often smarter than people who have gone to college, because here's actually something I really want to ask you. There's a big argument on the right about whether universities have gone off the deep end in recent years or they've always been this bad. What is your point of view on that?
They've always been a little bad, but they've gone off the deep end.
You think they've gotten worse significantly?
I think so, yeah. Just from what I'm reading about.
Well, I mean, you've also had many interns over the decades. So you would actually have a data set to say, are the kids getting crazy or not?
They weren't indoctrinated like they are now.
Okay.
And they weren't telling other people to shut up.
Yeah. I mean, I think this aggression is something that, well, we saw that in the 60s with the free speech movement and the sit-ins and taking over the offices of the deans and whatever.
And that was also aggression against the capitalist state.
Sure.
But most of it was against the military. I don't want to go to Vietnam. And why are we at war? But that's different from saying you're wearing my culture's clothing, and
right.
You have no right, and you have no right to say that, and we're going to drown you out if you try to argue something I don't like. That's new.
So one of the arguments I make in terms of how free speech is winning is that it used to be that there were three networks with largely identical points of view, and then you had cable with different points of view and more edgy, and now with social media, despite picking up people like Alex Jones and Gavin McInnes, it's virtually impossible to silence schools of thought. Even the Nazis, they're getting their views out there. And I think this is huge progress and to me, this hysteria on the left is a function of them losing control of the microphone.
Interesting, maybe. I think it's also that they are sincere, and they have professors telling them, look, you have white privilege, and you who are not white, you are really discriminated against, and you have a right to shut these people up because they have been stepping on you.
Sure.
But yeah, when I was at ABC, they just thought they were the middle. When I say I was the only guy in the building with an opinion, it was because they just knew that everyone knew that abortion should be legal, that we need more gun regulations, that we need more safety regulations. Sensible people just thought that. And it's nice. Then Fox came and bunch of jerks, right-wingers. No one will watch that. Oops, they're getting a big audience.
The biggest.
But it's still just a couple percent of the TV viewers. You got Fox. He had Fox on one side, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, NPR on the other side. So the conservative appeal was still a minority.
But I mean, and yet the reaction is so disproportionate. I mean, Michael Tracy, who's a very good leftist, he pointed out that the people who are freaking out about Alex Jones have never listened to him, have no intention of listening to him. They're just upset that there's someone out there who's listening to something that they shouldn't. And this is very much this isn't his words, but this is very much the puritanical idea was the base of progressivism, that we really need to have unity of mind and unity of vision to make this country work.
And the danger of social media now is that the brilliant algorithms steer you to more of your side in the extreme.
Yeah.
And our brains are programmed. We're looking for confirmation bias.
Sure.
When this first broke, when Bernie Goldberg wrote Bias, talking about his experiences at CBS with Dan Rather, it was a #1 bestseller, but not just #1, for weeks, and a huge seller. I would ask my colleagues at ABC, did you read that? What do you think? Nobody even read it.
Right.
They just didn't want to hear about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's this kind of pod person aspect to it.
Yes.
Is that something that, I mean, you're intellectually curious. We've had political discussions. I mean, again, like I said, when the kids come up to you and ask you questions, you're not brushing them off. Isn't it to me, it's very disturbing when you talk to people who are bright, accomplished, educated, and productive, to find them to be intellectually incurious. I can't wrap my head around it.
It doesn't bother me. I think it's good. We live in a country where people don't have to pay attention to politics, where you can live your life. And there's the joke about 1% of the people make things happen.
Sure.
9% watch the people who make things happen, and that's the cable news viewers. And 90% wake up and say, what happened? And there's truth to that, because they are worrying about sex and sports and music and making money and their families and fashion, 1,000 things. I don't want those people voting and deciding
Sure.
on who will govern me.
Well, this is another reason why the big guy matters. This is the elite theory, which is you're always going to have an elite running things. And my quote is, those who need leaders aren't qualified to choose them. That it's impossible to be informed enough. It's possible to informed enough as a senator to know what to vote on, because you're covering views as diverse as abortion, military, foreign affairs, taxation, the Fed. It's no human brain is really going to be capable, especially on that specific level that they're doing it. The power that they have is going to be like a bull in a china shop, regardless of how brilliant they are, because they're still going to be ignorant of, like all humans, of 99% of knowledge.
Absolutely true. And I get annoyed when people during the presidential race say, well, who's going to run the country? Because the politician isn't running the country. They're just the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and presiding over one branch of government. Most of life is run by free people pursuing our own self-interest, and thank God for that. And then not everybody has to be an expert. The person is an expert in his own affairs.
So you're a little older than me. The vitriol Reagan faced was huge. I mean, it was a given that we're going to have a nuclear war with Russia. It was a given that he's a senile, dumb lunatic, and it's going to be the end of the world.
So
right?
Stupid and backward and conservative.
Yeah, hick.
An actor.
Right. He doesn't know it. He's a fraud. You're right. Was the vitriol towards him lighter than it is now towards Trump?
Not much. And by the way, I was on the wrong side there. I was one of those Reagan haters. I was still a creature of the left at that time.
Wow. You voted for Carter.
Yes.
He's history's greatest
Carter
monster.
Was great.
Really?
Yeah. He wore the cardigan. He was more down home. He was going to solve the energy crisis.
That he
I
caused.
believed all that garbage.
What made you change your mind specifically about Reagan?
It wasn't specific about Reagan. I changed my mind when I saw that my philosophy was crap, and I started to read more. I discovered Reason Magazine and Adam Smith and woke up. And then I realized, these people who I now respect, they liked Reagan. I have to give him another look.
Huh. But I mean, psychologically, once people reach a certain age, they get ossified usually. And it's very, very hard to change your worldview. Like, what makes you different in that regard?
Either I am different or the fact that I was doing it for a living and I was trying to learn. They paid me to read and learn about this stuff every day. Eventually, the facts beat me into submission.
No, but there was a study I saw, and I'm blanking on who. I think Jonathan Haidt talks about this a lot, where vis-a-vis confirmation bias, when we find data that contradicts our worldview, that actually encourages us to double down in our worldview as opposed to accommodate the new data. It's this very big paradox of human psychology.
I believe that, but I think Haidt also said that it takes on average 6 contrary pieces of information to change somebody's mind.
Sure.
And because I was in the business and reading the Times and the Wall Street Journal every day, I was seeing those 6 pieces of information.
Is doing all this stuff still fun for you after all this time?
Yeah, especially the editing of the videos. I mean, now I get to do whatever the heck I want and make my own 5-minute video. I don't have some executive at ABC or saying, yeah, we don't, it's predictable libertarian stuff. We don't want that. Or someone at Fox saying, we only have time for this much. So it's fun to write these stories, and I know they're going to be great, and then I watch them and they suck, they're awful, and then we go through maybe 8 edits before it actually is pretty good.
I learned how to write from Peggy Noonan's book. She wrote What I Saw at the Revolution, which is superb. She was Reagan's speechwriter and Bush's speechwriter. She came up with the phrase 1,000 points of light. And how she talked about it was, you write it and it's going to be crap. And you go back and you make it coherent, but it's still crap. Then you go back and you make it nice. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Like the first time, this is terrible. But I know I've been around the block enough to know that I can make it not terrible.
That's true, except when I first write it and imagine the video that's going to go with it, I think it's going to be great. And only when I watch the rough cut do I see that it's crap.
I wish that I would be able to have a career as long, as prestigious as yours, and still have that exuberance for it. Because after a certain time, a lot of these stories, I mean, isn't this something frustrating for you, that the stories are going to have the same basic message, which is the free market's wonderful, the government's the problem?
Maybe a little, but there's always something new. I just went to Washington to cover the new scooters that you can leave everywhere. And we've gone from the city bike racks, bike share, to bikes you can leave anywhere. Now scooters you can live anywhere. Then there's a new business of kids who pick the abandoned scooters up and make money charging them, and an excitement if the kid is cute when he talks, or the spokeswoman from the company is good looking, and good, I'll get 17 more viewers because she has a nice smile, and all those calculations are fun.
Let's talk about the grouchy side of John Stossel. What are some of your big pet peeves in life?
Pet peeves in life?
Yeah, besides people showing you photos of their kids.
People who just assume that you're interested in their socialist crap, or people who won't argue my libertarian arguments against me when they are just smug in their knowledge that they get from the New York Times.
Right. Someone once said that the New Yorkers are the most provincial people on earth. And I think there's that mentality. If I read the New Yorker, therefore I'm a world traveler. It's like, or like I know at the secret restaurant, it's like, I assure you that there's many other people who read about that restaurant in the New Yorker.
Yeah, they read the New Yorker and listen to NPR, and they're just smug. And if they were willing to then argue, well, here's why I think socialism is better, or why Hillary is going to be great or something, but they don't want to argue. I'm just he's icky. I don't want to have this discussion. On the other hand, I don't really like arguing with them after a while either.
It must be weird when multiple Emmy Awards, books, best-selling books, multiple TV shows, to have some jackass on the street who's a New Yorker subscriber feel comfortable talking down to you, especially because you've been in their side too.
Right, it's annoying, and it's worse when it's old friends who we've spent the weekend with who can't really anymore. We can, but we just can't talk politics, and since all they want to talk about is
Trump,
is theater or hating Trump, and I have no theater gland, it's difficult.
Yeah. When Reagan was president, was there this pathological need to talk about him every 5 minutes as there is with Trump?
Not in my world, but I was a young guy. All we talked about was meeting girls.
But everyone talks about Trump. Like if you go on these dating apps, they talk Trump. Like, no Republicans, blah, blah, Trump. It's like, if this is not a turn on.
This is new. Trump is special.
Yeah, he is. His special is the absolute. There's this troll side to you, a little bit of one. Is there that side of you that kind of chuckles to himself when he sets off these tweets that are just completely insane and hilarious?
Yeah,
like when he went off on John Brennan yesterday.
I don't follow the investigation stuff, but when he came out with fake news.
The left came out with fake news. He co-opted it because they were getting ready in the wake of an inevitable Hillary victory to start censoring points of view that were not feeding to their conclusion from social media.
But when he picked it up, my leftist friends were enraged that he would denigrate the media. And to me, a lot of my work was the under the topic of we're scaring you to death. And as a consumer reporter, part of the job is to warn you about what might hurt you or kill you. But we would team with the trial lawyers and pick up minor things and miss big things. And that's fake news. Tonight on 2020, exploding coffee pots or exploding Bic lighters. And look, more of you are going to watch if we say, tonight, this will kill you, than if we say, by and large, things are pretty good.
Michael Malice here. Let me tell you about Infinite CBD. That's infinitecbd.com. It offers the cleanest, healthiest, purest form of CBD available. What's CBD? I'll tell you. It's 100% legal. It's a natural ingredient taken from hemp plants, and it helps keep your body's endocannabinoid system balanced. So let's explain what that means. It gives you all the benefits of marijuana without it getting high. CBD has helped people have chronic pain, inflammation, anxiety, you're stressed out from work, and more. They offer a variety of products to make sure you can enjoy CBD the way you prefer. At infinitecbd.com, they have capsules, vape juice, gummies. Here's a quick tip. You can use the topical cream. You got an injury, you got a sore muscle, rub it on there, plain and simple. You put on stuff, it doesn't hurt anymore. Gummies, can't go to sleep, calms you down. Freaking out at a meeting, calms you down. CBD pills with caffeine, helps you focus and get stuff done. Counterintuitive, but it works. If you go to infinitecbd.com and use promo code WELCOME15, you get 15% off any purchase. So infinitecbd.com, WELCOME15, and you will be welcome. Has there ever been stories that you've done the digging and realized that the scare is actually warranted and that the corporation was this covering up this big danger?
Small dangers, but yeah, there are bad corporations, but very rarely over the years. And I struggle to give you an example. I won 19 Emmy Awards. What did I win them for? Cigarette companies were handing out free cigarettes to minors.
Oof, that's pretty bad.
The milk companies in New York were fixing prices, and if a supermarket dared to put it on sale, they'd threaten to cut them off.
But now their prices are fixed by law in New York, I believe.
In many, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, government can do it. Government's good. Don't you know that? That the same cosmetics that they sold for $1 million were made in the same vat in Queens as the cheap stuff.
Yeah.
None of it's that terrible.
Okay. Were you really kind of sticking to yourself throughout these years, or were you pals
Yes.
with other news people?
Except to go out and drink and look for girls, I was not pals with my fellow news people.
Was this by choice, or was it was just mutually you're not my kind of person, I'm not your kind of person?
Choice, I'm kind of a nerdy loner, and I liked going home to read.
Okay.
Playing beach volleyball or reading, and I'm not that social.
Huh. Well, that's very kind of you to schlep all the way down here then. Thank you. It's again appreciated.
Well, this isn't social. This is, I don't know, it's work. It has a purpose. There's something more than just hanging out.
I thought we were cool, John. I thought
we are cool. We're hanging out here. But we're also doing a podcast.
That's true. That's true. There's cameras everywhere. Yeah, there's even in the bathroom.
I would have dressed differently had I known.
Oh, you didn't know you were going to be on camera?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had 2 weeks ago. I
would have fixed my hair.
Your hair looks lovely, especially the mustache, which everyone. My Facebook group was telling me I should wear a fake mustache to interview you, but I thought that would be a bridge too far. How long have you had the mustache for?
When I was a junior in college, I grew it, and I found women were more interested, and I kept it.
So I like. Okay, so this is interesting. You talk a lot about picking up women, right?
I was struggling on that front. I was little. I matured late.
What?
That formed my life.
So what were your tricks for picking up women that you would advise young men of today? Besides
get a job on television.
Yeah? Is that the trick?
I was stunted because I matured late. I went to New Trier High School, which had 1,200 kids in my graduating class, and I was the littlest one. And I talked like this when all the other guys were talking like this, and it beats into your ego that there's something wrong, immature about you, and I didn't mature till late, so I had to struggle to catch up.
But
being on TV helps.
So at a certain point, would women just start approaching you? Hey, aren't you John Stossel? And you're like, hey, let me buy you a drink.
Not usually that overt, but it became much easier when I was recognized.
Huh. Okay, I like this Lothario John Stossel of the past. Have you ever thought of doing an autobiography?
I wrote Give Me a Break,
Yeah.
which was kind of an autobiography explaining how my brain flipped around.
Sure, but that's an intellectual, right, memoir in a sense. I'm talking about more like the years in the newsrooms and things like that. Like, let me ask you another question. The stuff that happened with Matt Lauer, was that a surprise to you, or was that something that you were like, this is the kind of thing we all had to deal with?
It surprised me, but I was never in the gossip loop with NBC anchors. I'm kind of amazed by all of them, like the ones who say, well, you know, in our years it was accepted in the casting couch and all that. When I first went to WCBS, I said, I need to do research. I can't be a consumer reporter and just go out and cover things.
Sure.
I need interns. Well, we don't have any money for that. Well, can I talk to colleges and try to get free interns? And we did. And even then, at horny age 24 or something, I knew it was not okay to have sex with one of these interns.
Right.
And Harvey Weinstein is saying, oh, well, we just thought it was okay at the time.
But the thing that I think most people are, well, let's talk conspiracy, right? There was a conspiracy to keep Harvey Weinstein safe. There was a conspiracy about Bill Cosby, you know, that they say everyone knew and things like that. Kevin Spacey is another one. I think for most Americans, like, what was Brian Williams, the guy who got booted to MSNBC from NBC when he lied about, you know, being shot or whatever in a plane. There's a difference between I'm a lech and I sleep with all these young women, and I'm going to make someone watch me shower, or I'm going to, you know, masturbate into a potted plant. That's something most people can't wrap their heads around. And I think to them, it speaks to this really culture of depravity, because there's just, you can't empathize with that kind of thinking. You can empathize with, yeah, I'm going to get laid, I'm going to screw my interns. You can't empathize with, I'm going to make this Uma Thurman watch me shower.
It's true, but I see how it works in that, who's this comedian who put his dick on some girl's shoulder?
Louis C.K.?
Yeah, but like, I like Louis C.K., and so I want to forgive him for that. But you're right, that's just really disgusting.
But that, I think, is him
top.
being
Playful?
like, that to me is more of a, so if she's a comedian, a so-called joke, then if you don't watch me shower, you're going to get fired, because he did not really have that powerful.
I agree. That's
all,
worse.
Yeah, and all the women who the showering.
Yes.
Yeah, all those women, in my understanding, did forgive Louis C.K. because he came forward. He goes, you know what? This was screwed up. I thought I was kidding. I clearly see this was not funny at all. You know, blah, blah, blah. Whereas with Weinstein, we have literal cases of rape. You know, I don't think any of those women with Louis C.K. at any point, they felt humiliated, understandably, but they never felt in danger or you know, that they were assaulted in a physical sense, that Louis was going to physically hurt them.
And I'm in a book club with an author who has movies made by Weinstein, and he said that in meetings, Weinstein would spend the time talking about how tough he was and how I could kill a man with 2 fingers. And the guy was nuts.
Yeah, a bad person.
Bad person.
So we got a couple of questions from the chat room.
Okay.
The first one is...
There are people out there?
Yes, John
I thought
Stossel.
it was just you and I.
Well, we're the friends, but then there's the hoi polloi. Would you advise a youngster to pursue a career when the end result is always having a boss to report to?
That's most careers.
Yeah.
So I do think it's nice if you could do something with no boss, but it's not easy. But that's the beauty of today's world. You can try stuff.
Oh, yeah. Right. There's so much more freedom than there was, you know, even when I was starting out. What's the biggest story you ever got wrong?
That I'd spent years saying business is a problem.
Right.
And turns out that the way you get really rich in America is to treat your customers well. And nothing motivates people to do that like making money selfishly.
Yeah. Oh, you sound like Ayn Rand there.
She was right.
That was a great impression of Miss Rand. Are you a member of, and do you value, you had the Libertarian candidates for president debate on your show, Austin Peterson, who ran as a Republican for Senate, Missouri, came in third. John McAfee, who may or may not be a murderer and who married a prostitute, and Gary Johnson, who ended up being the nominee. Are you a member of the LP? And do you?
I am not. I voted for Gary Johnson. They were all disappointing in the debate. McAfee perhaps spoke the best, but he may be dangerous and crazy for all I know.
I think it's pretty clear he's dangerous and crazy.
I'm hoping for maybe Larry Sharp in New York will be.
Everyone loves Larry.
leader.
Everyone keeps telling me to interview Larry Sharp. Like, I've never seen any libertarian politician get as much support as him.
That's good to hear.
Why do you think he's so beloved?
I have no idea. I've only met him once,
Okay.
and he hasn't killed anyone. He
Allegedly.
has said silly things on TV that I know of. I don't know. People. It's good to know that people speak highly of him. And as soon as he gets on the radar screen, I'll do a new video on him.
Are you aware of all the? I got someone daring me to say something, which I'm not going to do out of spite. Are you aware of all the infighting in the libertarian movement? Because just 2 weeks ago on this show, I had Matt Welch from Reason sit down with Tom Woods from Mises, and they'd never met before. And this was kind of this rapprochement between these two sides, which I was very proud to kind of bring forward because there's so much infighting. Is that something you follow, or is that something that you don't bother with?
I don't bother with it. I'm aware of it. I've many times had to say, tell me again why the objectivist group split from the other Ayn Rand group, and why is it that the Cato people hate the Mises people? And I've had Woods and Welch on the show. They both are smarter than me, and they bring wonderful ideas. Did they end up at least friendly on your show?
Oh, it was extremely friendly. And my point, it kind of speaks to, I think, your point of view is, I don't like it when people can't get along. And I don't ever go after people who are trying to do the same thing broadly politically that I am. So I think it's very sad, and it's inevitable. Any movement, for example, just yesterday I was talking about this on Twitter. You have the Church of Satan and the Temple of Satan, and they hate each other, right? Because the Temple of Satan are putting up those monuments in Arkansas. You may have been following this free speech thing, and basically they're in Arkansas. This actually would be of interest to you and to the listeners. In Arkansas, they tried to put up a Ten Commandments monument by the Supreme Court. And the point being, like, many of these commandments are not actually compatible with the Constitution, specifically the First Commandment and some of the others. So they said, okay. And they said, well, this is free religion. Any religion's welcome. The Church of Satan goes, okay, Temple of Satan, excuse me. So they sued to get a monument of Baphomet, the goat-headed deity, and two children, a boy and a girl, looking up at him in reverence. And they're saying, we're going to put next to, freedom of religion. And this was a big...
In a public square.
In a public square. This was a big legal issue. And now some schools are having religious courses after school, using public space for, teaching religious ideas. They go, okay, if this isn't picking one religion or another, we're going to have after-school Satan courses. And they made coloring books and so on and so forth. But they...
Fine.
Right, but they hate the Church of Satan because this is Anton LaVey's organization who are like, well, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to have this kind of infighting in any scene. The Bernie Sanders versus the Hillary people obviously loathe each other. But my point is, it's like, life is short. I'm short. If people are smart and they kind of have good intentions, and maybe we haven't come to a free country, maybe the Reason approach will work. Maybe the Mises approach, burn it all down, will work. At the end of the day, if people are agreeable and kind, there's no reason they can't sit down and be friendly with each other.
They ought to, and you ought to talk to everybody if you can, including the guys on your T-shirt.
Well, I mean, they wouldn't. They're dead, and they wouldn't take my calls because they only talk to Koreans. But yeah, that's funny. That's interesting. There's not that much infighting in the North Korea. That's one of the reasons I took that as one of my issues, is because there's such broad unanimity in this country vis-a-vis
North Korea,
the North Korea, and how bad it is, and how everyone agrees they need more economic liberty and more social liberty.
I thought many were just brainwashed into thinking that the leader is godlike. And
no, I mean in
make
America.
The sunrise. In America, we're unanimous.
There's the unanimity. What I had to fight, and I largely succeeded, I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back, is when I started, there was the unanimity that they're a carnival, and aren't these people funny and silly, this country? And now there's the understanding that, yeah, these people are doing these dances because there's a gun at your head. It's like in the Wild West. If someone points a gun at my head, tells me to dance, I'm dancing. And this is not a source of humor. This is a source of great horror.
I assume that the girls also like to dance and people like to perform. And
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, there's a great sense of pride. You're chosen for this public display. To even step foot in Pyongyang, you have to have very high political credentials and so on and so forth. So there is an element of that. But, you know, the fact that there was this documentary where all these North Koreans had eye surgery done by Westerners. You know, they fixed their cataracts and so on and so forth. And the first thing they did is, you know, praise Kim Jong-il. And thank you for fixing my eyes and so on and so forth. Everyone's like, haha, these people are so silly. And what I have to point out is these people are on camera. So, you know, if something good happens to me and I'm on camera, oh yeah, thank you, government. You know, you did this. You know, and obviously I don't like making comparisons between North Korea and the United States. I was on Alex Jones's show, and he was trying to make it out that Hillary Clinton's basically a young Kim Jong-il, or, you know, a predecessor to him. And I go, no. We're not going down this route. Have you ever met her?
I had lunch with her once.
Oh.
Sat next to her.
Well, you didn't have lunch. You had lunch next to her or with her?
With her. We were on vacation in a Caribbean island, and my brother-in-law had given money to the Clintons.
Okay.
Ran into them on the beach. Said, you want to come to lunch? They didn't know I was going to be there.
You crashed lunch? Yes.
Bill sat on one side, Hillary on the other. She was next to me, and she was very civil, and we argued about regulation. Because on the island, people were complaining, oh, they're bringing in these Chinese workers and they're living to a trailer, one of those shipping trailers, and they're doing construction. And she said, that's why we need that's why all these countries, that's why America needs regulation. And I said, but wait a second, they're not slaves.
Right.
No one's forcing them to live there. They choose to come over
And
because
they're probably wealthy by Chinese standards because they're sending that money back.
And presumably this alternative is better than their other choices.
Right.
And she, of course, would not see it that way. And we went on for about 30 minutes. And then she'd had enough of me, and it was kind of chilling and brilliant. She just went cold and only talked to the person on the other side. And
that's awesome.
That was it. Cut me off.
Well,
and then they switched places, and Bill sat next to me.
Did he charm your pants? I mean, the guy's supposed to be one of the most charming people on earth.
He's charming and touchy. Like he sort of put his hand on my forearm while talking. And I thought, well, am I being too close to the former president? Maybe I'll scooch further away. And then he comes over, and that's, I guess, part of his charm.
So what's her vibe like? Does she have that? I think it was a New York Times piece. I've looked for the quote where someone who followed her for a year as first lady described, and this was a leftist, described her as scarily messianic.
There's a little of that, but you take any intellectual from Wellesley or any Ivy League-ish school, and there's a lot of that.
So she had that same kind of
arrogance.
vibe. Okay. She did not give you the warm and fuzzy feeling that a politician would.
No, well, that's part of her problem.
Yeah.
And also, it's lawyers. They have law school disease. The conceit that you can manage life through paper and procedure. And by doing that, they got better grades at good law schools. And they just think that's how life works. The messiness of spontaneous order and the free market, they don't process.
I was on Glenn Beck's show, and we had the same conclusion. And I want to see if we can go 3 for 3. In your opinion, who was the worst president of all time? There's a correct answer here.
The worst of all time.
And don't give me James Buchanan.
I mean, I don't know. Hoover, who's passed taxes to start the Depression. Roosevelt, who made it worse. I don't have an opinion. I know everybody, who's the best president? Who's the worst? I just don't have those opinions.
Well, the worst is clearly Wilson.
Wilson did a lot of bad stuff.
He's the worst. My friend Pax had this joke about he was a time traveler, and he said, "I'm going to go in my time machine." And the time cop said, "How'd he word it?" He goes, "Oh, did you go back in time?" He goes, "I went back in time and I killed baby Wilson." And they go, "Well, what about baby Hitler?" And you go, "Who?"
I don't get the logic there, because if you killed Wilson, Hitler would not have risen to power?
Correct.
And educate me. Why is that?
Well, you had the Treaty of Versailles, the fact that he blew the peace, the fact that he was so, talk about, Ivy League overeducated. I mean, he was a university professor. He genuinely thought he was on a mission from God to save the world by imposing progressivism everywhere. He had his stroke, and then it kind of incapacitated him for much of his presidency. He brought us into World War II, but for him, this Lenin might not have been in power. So whatever he put Eugene V. Debs in jail for fighting the war effort. So any kind of government evil, that guy was the founder, and he basically thought the Constitution allowed him to be a dictator. And having the war was a great excuse for the progressives to show the country how a mechanized America can work under the complete totalitarian state.
And how did he start World War II? Because he wasn't around then.
No, but the point is, he put the path in order to, you had the Weimar, you had the hyperinflation, you had this peace could have been settled in a much more saner way. I'm
just too ignorant to argue with you or even add to the discussion.
So there's that
was one of those history lectures at Princeton where Wilson went and taught, and they have buildings named after him. But they were so boring that I just don't remember anything about them.
One of the great things that I do like when the left is trying to change the names, Wilson was a virulent racist, they're trying to change all the things that are named after Wilson, and I'm going to stand back and applaud while they do that. So actually, my favorite comedian, Neil Hamburger, also has a joke where this was back in 12 years ago. He would go in front of these crowds and he'd go, "Can we agree that George Bush is the worst president America's ever had?" And then they all would applaud, and he'd go, "Which makes it stranger that his son, George W. Bush, is in fact the best."
And everybody boos.
No, everyone doesn't know what to do. What question, I'm going to end on this. This is a very Barbara Walters-y question, I think. What was it like working with her?
Frightening.
Really?
Yeah, she had no interest in me. I was co-anchoring with her, and if she wanted more airtime, I got less. And she was perfectly pleasant and fierce about perfectionism in her work. She'd think she would coast at that point of her career, but she would obsess about every 3 seconds. "John, what do you think we should do with this 3 seconds here?" Everything was
so tense. Did you see when Norm Macdonald was on The View in 2000, they recently rediscovered the footage?
No.
He was on The View, a very kind of innocuous show.
Started by her.
Yeah, she's there. Star Jones is there. Joy Behar is there. And they're asking him, "Hey, what do you think about the presidential campaign?" It was Bush versus Gore. And Norm Macdonald goes, "Well, I'm for Bush because I think I'm sick of having a murderer in the White House." And Barbara Walters goes, "What?" She goes, "Oh, yeah, didn't you know this? It's very widely reported. Bill Clinton's a murderer. He killed this guy, Vince Foster." And she's like, "Okay, let's change the subject." He goes, "Oh, you don't want to talk about how Bill Clinton murders people?" And he would not let it go, and she was getting livid. But in her defense, I think, she had to fight very hard. It's not that anyone else didn't, but to attain the position she had. And she was, in many ways, a groundbreaker.
Yeah, she was tense because she had to be tense to succeed the way she did.
So who of you that you've interacted with and worked with over the years, who is the most different from their public persona?
Boy, all those people. The successful ones are not that different.
Okay.
Like when I first came to Fox, Roger Ailes made the speech. You have to be authentic to succeed in TV. Like, Bill O'Reilly's an asshole. If you wake him up at 2 a.m, he'll be an asshole, and he's real. Hannity's a nice guy, and that's the way he is. You got to be authentic. Who was different? I guess Barbara was more smiley than she was in real life. Hugh Downs was Hugh Downs. Local anchors I've worked with, your listeners wouldn't know. The people at Fox are quite authentic.
Okay. There was another time when Barbara was on with Rosie O'Donnell on The View, and Barbara was trying to, she's like, oh shucks, I'm a regular gal just like everyone else. And Rosie O'Donnell goes, you have Picassos in your house. She's like, you're very successful. She goes, you've earned it. Barbara, you're a legend. You're a pioneer. You've earned it. But you have Picassos. And Barbara was all being embarrassed. She goes, doesn't mean anything. And Rosie O'Donnell's like, it doesn't mean anything that you have Picassos in your home? That you're like Joe Sixpack? And she, I mean, do you think that's also a thing with journalists? And we'll wrap with this, that they want to perceive themselves as just like everybody else when their career is such an aberration?
Yes, I think we all want to be regular people. I mean, Barbara on the set of 2020 would be obsessing over these little note cards. What are you doing? Is this my seating arrangement for my party tonight? Well, it's that difficult? Yes, it is. You have no idea.
John Stossel, I mean, thank you so much for coming, schlepping all the way down here. And it is.
Well, thank you for being entertaining.
Well, I try.
Smart and entertaining.
Sometimes I succeed. Sometimes, usually I don't. I told a joke last night in Kennedy that bombed really, really badly. The worst bomb I've had in 4 years, which she snapped.
Oh, let's hear it.
Oh, it's so simple. We were talking, you know, she had William Weld on her show after the 2016 election, and she eviscerated him because she's like, you said you're a libertarian, but she goes, you endorsed Hillary during the campaign. You have all these gun control. You're for gun control, all these other things. You're just using the party as a platform to get further. And, you know, the big knock is, although Gary Johnson is clearly a libertarian, a moderate libertarian, William Weld is to his left, and he's much more of a textbook Republican is the argument. And he's going to run for president, libertarian candidate in 2020. So we're talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I said, well, given her political stances, she's probably going to give William Weld a run for the money as the libertarian nominee from the right. And Kennedy just goes, what?
What?
And she's just going, what? Like, angrily. And I'm like, I've never had that happen in all the years of doing her show. So I quickly had to backpedal. Although my joke about Rudy Giuliani is, you know, most people primarily know him as America's second ugliest drag queen, but he was also a prosecutor for many years. So that one did land. So okay.
I thought they were both okay.
Thank you, John Stossel. And thank you so much for being a guest. This is a huge honor. I will see you all next week. You are welcome.
What's the use of a gun?